速度是好慢。
对，特别慢，装的时候就特别慢，电脑不是盘有点刺啦响，有点坏掉了，估计是。
我就叫他换了他了。
哎呀，你说那么好一个男生，怎么都变成那样了呢？我就感觉不可思议，我操！简直了！
大哥，你怎么能说这样的话？这个口面不是心酸实话。对啊，你怎么觉得他是一个很好的男生呢？
开始都觉得挺好的呀。
一开始就喜欢他，因为他经常在我面前说女朋友的话，而且说
就是老喜欢说别人坏话，就是。
你说了吗？我说一个男的遵守什么，还经常说女朋友有什么不好的，哪有这样子？说不好，你应该通接着说女朋友有什么好。宽容大量的话不是。
但是就他后面说的那些表现，应该是他女朋友也挺受不了的。
真的，你不知道他1个月了，为什么还是没有洗衣服的
？1个月不洗衣服，你没看见别人洗衣服？
洗衣粉像这样都没有。
哎呀，剪来啊！头发剪来。
大哥想说，哎，
对他让我剪，我好几次。
你做完了那个项目了吗？
哪个项目？
鱼呢？
自个儿的，还有团队的没有？
那个，他突然说，他们说，主要是还是7月份让我就开心，我今天就马上去玩，就说话了，还知道。
哎，不是你那个，我还是不清楚你那个东西啊，它要达成什么效果呀？不是。
那个下面没有你之后的。
不是你。
完成了第一个。然后剩下的还
不是开始状态，就是。
开始状态 ABC 上面。
你最后要把路径打出来是吗？
路径没有。
他自个儿走过去是吗？
也不是，最后结果到了 ABC。
还是说做一个这个你自己去做有？
不用这样，不用这样。
那是要怎么？
最后出来这个 ABC 这样就好了。然后花了多长时间？一定要按照那个深度优先、方式优先、接待加深算法还有那个 HR 算法来。
我看网上有，能找到。
有，他们因为那个我没看那个。
就说。
他就是空白那个移动，他不。
就是这个意思。开始出来呢就是这个，然后你点启动，然后最后它词儿变成那样了，然后你算中间时间多长。
不用聊我们的了，我们已经在外国炒歌结束了。
就说你那差不多了，是不是？
没有，做完了，现在的跟他一起好
不是我这找到一个现成的程序，不是那个，不是3个的，是整个8屏的。
它是16。
对。那你把它改写不就行了吗？
我看不懂上，没有找得到。
我这有 present 的。
这个小哥就是这个话。但是看起来特别简单，因为他那就是
而且我上次我体验运行了一下，我看他为什么他在那搞半天，我操，还得等。
他是有那个 game， 还有那个
有 game 的，他是一个做了一个 game， 相当于是。
不是蛮快的，他那个实现了那个算法，然后把这几种算法，然后对比，哪个更好，然后就要写报，除了代码，然后不知道，这个要检查的，这个要检查
历史。Web 的历史。
copy 不就好了？要改写。他那个给了好多那都是。哪有这么多衣服？ 知道他只拿2个相过来，一个是到底我还有联系吧，然后穿来穿去都那几件。这个不能是手指，没可能，亮都没有亮出来，因为亮在自己家里，没可能，他自己不是亮出来。我在自己看看有点那我不会想的呀。
那你们后面多长时间就对那个男生？1个
月了，差不多。
认识1个月之后才10
号
，10月13号，那不是刚那个，说你跟苏水还2个人还中间闹矛盾呢，因为他。哎呀我操！哎呀！
因为当时他跟自己特别熟，然后我就不好意思，前面的跟自己说对话，有点别扭。然后后来有一天听说剩下公费，因为公费用的好的话就200多吧，就2个，一个不到就没了嘛。
他都用你们的是吗？
对，然后我就算一下，然后他就问我为什么严肃开始，我说被他气疯了，因为我说他一直说我不是我做饭之类的嘛，一直说我做，但是他不是说那个关烤肉，你是谈一个态度吧？他说我们不这样做的，然后我说你想要怎样做？你告诉我，他这么说话，然后在客厅一直看视频，然后我在里面待了20分钟，他都不进来，然后我就说我说错了，我不知道，然后又还有跟父亲之间的关系特别别扭，当时我就感觉到，然后就特立场，然后就第2天，然后一直跟我说，然后我就知道有这么多误会。
大哥还是大裤衩
2个人讲过这么多人嘛。我还是有机会。但是上网搜的呀。但是要不做。这样爆款。说脾气。
然后苏姐说男生欠你们钱，说还钱的时候还抹了个你。
对呀，抹了个领口，这好像296.5，然后240吧，我都不要。那天他看我220，他说那220吧，我不要，浪的。然后其实他还要我说2万3万之类的借他嘛，因为他说他没有现金，他说买个饮料或者什么的，买完之后是找零的话是不给我们的，直接带到袋子里面了。特别好，可爱哦。
那是挺可爱的。
对。但是我们店嘛，那个零钱半周也然后我会说我师妹来说他打开门，我就看到地上有什么了。
有个妹子给他洗衣服是吧？
没有。应该是想泡那个，但是那妹子在流体。
那怎么认识的呢？
就反正是杭州的呀，然后是他前女友的好朋友。
我天，太气。
那他前女友有什么好处？
不是，如果就是跟他前女友没关系，如果那个人答应了，那个人有问题，是不是啊？
他说那个女生是没有懒吧，然后我们上下水的地方，我以前跟他好的时候，我就男生然后他每次都想打我了，他每次我说他看他每次都打我，不是打我。就是跟我吵架是因为这事好多次了，我就说我怕，我真的怕啊。
Okay, good afternoon everybody. Sorry for the slight delay. For some reason my laptop won't output to HDMI, or the projector won't accept HDMI. Either way around, we're working on this machine. Right, I decided to swap the order of the two sessions this week. So tomorrow we'll talk about something that will be relevant to this. I haven't quite decided what format we'll take tomorrow. We might just do a bit of Q&A about this as well. Roll with it. Next week and the week after are on the Fridays are solely coursework, like tutorials, coursework workshops. So they'll primarily be question and answer based as opposed to like a lecture or anything like that. So following Friday. Right. So I'm going to launch the coursework that you're going to be doing this year. This is testing your ability to do and understand and demonstrate some of the technical elements of this module. So we've looked at things like various representation formats. So we've looked at XML and HTML, CSS as part of that. We've looked at the idea of how you make URIs, how you identify things, and we have also spoken last week about REST API, or the REST architecture, or using REST as a framework to best use the web architecture for making your web services. And this coursework is going to test your understanding of all of those parts. I'll reiterate this at the end, but just to highlight the various parts. 22nd November, that's a Tuesday, so it's a little under 3 weeks away. 5 o'clock hand-in. The hand-in is up, but it might not be live yet. I'll make sure that happens in the next couple of days. Usual late payment will apply, check the calendar for that. And this is worth 25% of the module. I think mixed essays worth 25%, and exams worth 50%. Correct me if that's wrong. This, unlike the things we've been doing before, this is individual. So you each submit your own one of these. So be careful about collaboration and collusion, follow the normal academic integrity advice that you get in all your degrees. Make sure it is clear that you have done all the work that you are submitting, and where you haven't done any of that work, you clearly identified it, and said, referenced it, or said who wrote that bit if you did. So to set the scene, this is a sort of a role-playing exercise almost for the coursework. So you started a job as the web architect at the ECS library. The person who was there before you was building a REST API to let people write applications that interact with your library system. But they left halfway through the implementation, and they were not very good at documenting this at all. So the system sort of half exists, but there's no information about how to use it. Your boss rushes off for a meeting, and they scribble a URI on a bit of paper and tell you to get on with it. The URI will be it's here, and it will also be in the information that I distribute about the coursework. That'll go up on Edge soon. And the first tip is go and do a HTTP get on that and see what you retrieve. It's worth noting that you'll need to be connected to the ECS VPN. So it's behind the ECS firewall, so you need to connect to the ECS VPN. If you haven't managed to do that yet, the help desk on level 3 of Zepler will be able to assist you. So take a laptop in there, and they'll help you set that up if you haven't already. The link in these slides also takes you to the ECS page to tell you how to set that up. So all you're given is this URI. So you're given that one URI, and you have to explore. So task 1 out of the 2 main tasks is to browse the API. So from that URI, find out what else you can find, or see what else you can find within the API. And that will both test your ability to do HTTP and understand all the things that HTTP gives you. And it will test your ability to, or your understanding of REST and what a REST API will look like, or how REST, or a decent REST system will make use of the web architecture to provide its API. As you're doing that exploration, make a note of what you find. And it's recommended you use one of those tools that was spoken about during the HTTP sessions, so Postman or REST Client or curl or HTTP, very nice Python-based client. Hi there.
Hi. In what format do we have to provide those notes? Like making
So notes are for you. Notes are for you. I'll tell you on the next slide what we're going to submit.
Okay.
Also, as part of proving that you've understood the whole API, we want you to submit or add a new book to the data within the web service. And how you do that should become apparent from your exploration. And we'd like you to record some evidence of what you've added there. In terms of that, try and submit accurate details for it. Don't just make garbage. It's not difficult to find a book. Go on Amazon and pick one. Try to do something that someone else hasn't already submitted, just to have a bit of variety in there. And record your evidence of doing this. So that might be screenshots of you doing this in post. It might be your curl text log. So, what you submit for part 1 is that evidence of you adding a book, whatever form that might come in, and then a single HTML5 page that documents the API. And as part of that, we expect the URIs that you've been communicating with, what the parameters within those URIs might mean, the HTTP methods that can be used on that URI, and there's some example input and output for each of those resources. Remember, that's base what your documentation looks like on best practices from other REST API documentation. So you'll notice the example input and output won't necessarily be the entire data set that's in there. It will be like a truncated list. It will be an example of what you might get back as opposed to exactly what you get back. Okay, so that's part one. And that makes up about, I think it's about 40% of the marks in part one. In the spec on EdShare, it has the full breakdown of the mark scheme. So part two, the interesting bit, the higher order bit on our Bloom's taxonomy. This is where you get to create. This is where you get to apply what you've been learning about how REST APIs work and create something. But in create, we're just designing. So we're not coding this. We are just creating a design for how our extension to the API will work. So your boss, now that you've worked out how the existing API works, your boss wants you to extend the API, extend the web service, so that users can take like loan books from the library. So it's up to you to think through like what are the steps that a client should go through to interact with your API to be able to perform a loan operation. And what are the various things that might happen in response? What happens when it goes right? What happens when there are errors? What happens why might there be errors? Well, because there are some restrictions on the system. These restrictions are effectively internalized. They're part of your system. What you're creating is the external interface. So remember, you're providing what the client asks for, what the client receives back from the web service. And that might make reference to these various parts, but it may not entirely rely on it. So what are the restrictions? So it's a library system. So the user's limited to the number of books they can loan. So that is one restriction that might cause an error. Books have to be returned within 3 days. They can be renewed, so an action there. There's a fine system, so if the user returns a book late, then it's a 50p per day fine. The user needs to be able to pay that fine through the system, through the web service. And the user cannot request a new book loan if they've already got 5 active loans or they owe a fine. Okay, so what do you do for part two? Well, it's your job to plan what would a typical interaction be between the client and this web service. And from that, identify what URIs you need to add to this. So you've already got some URIs from part one, but what additional resources do you need to add to represent this new part of the system? And also, what methods are appropriate for interacting with those resources? So what are the parts of HTTP that you'll manipulate and make use of to interact with data? I would like you, okay, it doesn't say on there, I would like you in your design to make as best use of HTOS, so hypertext as the engine of application state, as possible. As part of that, to encourage you along to doing that, I'd like you to create a state diagram which represents the various points within the loan process, the loan cycle, that the client can be in. And remember, with HTOS, movement between those states is an interaction with the server. So to get out of one state to another state, you have to perform an interaction. You have to do a HTTP method to a resource. And that moves you, well, it puts you back in the same state if nothing has changed because of that interaction, or it shifts you to another state. We had a brief look at a state diagram at the end of the REST lecture, but we'll talk about them again in the workshop if people have questions about them. The textbook, the course textbook, who has the course textbook? Anyone have a copy with them here? No, so the course textbook, REST in Practice, makes lots of use of these these sort of state diagrams. The one in Figure 4.1 is a good example of that sort of external facing API state diagram. Then finally, I would like you to record the possible interactions with your designed API, and if you choose to, and I don't expect you to, but your design might require it. If anything about the interaction with the existing API has to change, record that as well. So I'd like you to record each possible interaction. So what URI can you interact with, or at least what template of the URI can you interact with? Each of the methods that those support, and what happens when you do each of those things. And if it's appropriate, example input, example output, much like the sort of data that's going into the original documentation. But I don't want you to write up as documentation. I want it in an Excel spreadsheet, and there will be a template for that on the edge here. That's to make it easier to mark for me. Having this section, because that's very varied based on all of your different designs, and having that as uniform between everyone's submission makes it a lot easier for me to mark. So your two things are, in part one, you submit an HTML document describing the existing API and evidence of your book being added, and that's so we can test your ability to apply those technical skills of styling a page and building a structured HTML document. And then we want you to design a new working API and demonstrate that you understand the state that your client will be going through, and then all the different parts of that extension to the API that are possible and what they do. So, just to highlight a couple of things. Reminder again, you need to be on ECS VPN to get to this URI, so make sure you can get access to that. If you really struggle with that, then shout and we'll see what we can do to help. And the other thing. Okay, yes, to add data to it or to make changes, which is part one, you need to authorize as yourself. You use the authorization header, a token that's unique to you. I will email those out within the next couple of days. So you won't be able to add anything to the API until you've got it. Please don't book up. Very good. Should I put it on here?
It doesn't even work.
I have no idea how this works. We'll do that soon. I will email that to you. I recommend not sharing that with other people because it's uniquely identifies you and your username. Let's be honest, it won't make much difference. So you won't be able to do that until I send that email out. Hang tight, it will probably be tomorrow or on Monday. Where are we? And then lastly, a reminder. So 22nd November, that's Tuesday. 25% of coursework must be completed individually. So not group coursework, it is individual coursework. Nothing again. And I'm going to show you what the first URI looks like. But I can't connect to the ECS VPN. Ironically enough. So, questions. We have about 20 minutes left, so if there are any questions, we'll address those. Otherwise, we'll wrap up in a minute. So, any questions?
Another question. If we log on into the lab, we will be automatically connected to the VPN?
Yeah, well, you'll be within the right bit of the network. Within Zebra Labs, on a machine there, then you'll be able to. If you're connected to Wi-Fi on edge of your own, then you won't be within the right network. So if you're on a laptop on edge of your own, you'd have to VPN to it.
你自己设计一个服务。就服务就是完成一个功能，就是你 post 到后面去，那个回来你想要的数据，return，就是你发过去之后，它在后台这个服务在后台做处理的，然后它跟数据库交互。然后呢，你。
咱们到底做的是个
它应该是让你设定那个传输的方法，
但是你不做的数据库。
One CSS document, and then some file to represent the evidence of the book adding. That is non-constrained, so it could be an image, it could be a document, like a Word doc or a PDF, it could be a zip of images or so I'm not going to constrain how you do that evidence bit, that's up to you. And then the second bit, the state diagram, again, it's not constrained, but I prefer an image or a PDF. Again, I think it says that on the hand-in, that those are references, but it's not constrained, but this is constrained to being an Excel spreadsheet. So when you go to the EC hand, it'll be like 5 boxes.
不知道。
There's a question about this.
What is it?
Which bit of that you mean? So, very good question though. So, in terms of the CSS, what we're testing is your use of appropriate styling technology to make something that's readable. Okay, so that it's not just a plain, empty page that fills the width and is hard to read and doesn't have any weight.
And we use Bootstrap.
Sorry?
We use Bootstrap.
Nah, sort of cheap. You write CSS. Sorry? But we're not, like, explicitly, we are not testing your ability to design a fancy-looking style page. So it can look terrible, but as long as it makes use of decent CSS to get there, or sensible CSS to get there.
You would do that. You don't know. Yeah.
That's the textbook. The course textbook. Sorry?
What is it?
What is a textbook? It's in the library. I don't know. There is another website similar diagram, so I'll share that in the end.
没事，我到时候做出来给你签。这是波兰这个。反正这个 REST 还是挺。
做一个网上一脸不是我看他没有快是
Two questions. Hang on, guys.
That's how it's called. So it might not be relevant for everyone else. A data diagram part. How do you want that handled?
As an image.
An image file.
Yeah, so I guess we haven't discussed like how you might generate this. Something that lets you do block types. Like once you see one of these state diagrams, you'll get the idea. But something that lets you have like blocks or circles and lines between it that you can label will be good enough to get you a state diagram. So things like video or PowerPoint, even Microsoft Word will let you create blocks that connect lines together. But if you want to hand draw it, I'm not like as long as it's legible, I don't really mind. As long as it's some sort of image that looks like a state diagram and I can read it.
就是一个服务，你看不是你看咱那个系统里面好多可能10家这个服务，这就一个服务。
就它给它分两个，先让你看明白它也有这部分人物简单，对，然后再按对话的那块就那块类目写好，是吧？就看你设计合理不合理，这就是个人，这就是驱动的，是吧？ Yeah, sure.
You already have an e-version.
Yeah. Just give me a second, let me find page 上次是谁教的呀？行了，这个作业就只剩你了。起码得先看明白了，是不是吧？
可是这个是因为手，大手，我不知道，我不知道这个。
It's just an activity diagram, dude. It's an activity diagram with fancy colors.
The most high-tech that we can get.
Can you not focus? Is there no focus on it?
Yeah, there is.
Oh, yeah.
And then you got quotation.
Yeah, very clear. Yeah.
Okay, so in the textbook, their key example is something called RESTbox, which is the Starbucks ordering process, where they separate the person who takes the order and the barista who's making the coffee, and they represent that as a REST interaction. So how would you order a coffee through this sort of situation? What are the various states that you're in along the way? So in this example, you place the order, and you're in when you first submit your order, you're then in a state of having placed the order, but nothing has happened with that yet. And that means you can make updates, and the system can either reject or accept those updates if it's too late to make a change. Then you move on through the process by paying. So one of the options out of place is paying, and from that you move to the paid state, and then you can move into you request that it's prepared, you get served it, and then you pick it up and so on. So each of these, what's the important thing? Each of those lines are interactions. Each of those lines are a HTTP request of some sort, and they will either move you. Well, but in this case, they'll always move you to a different state. Yes.
For the paid activity, that's what I'm just going to call it. Should there not be the same thing as in accepted, rejected, and like a sort of loop? Because you're not quite sure, and you can't move to the next one until it's been accepted or rejected.
Or if you, for example, don't want a copy anymore, cancel on it.
Yeah, you could argue the case for that. So again, this comes down to your design of what you want your system to do. And certainly we can critically evaluate their design and say actually there's some things that are not. At this point in the book, that's all they've decided to represent, presumably to restrict the scope of it and to make that diagram simpler. Because if you had that possibility on every single stage, you would get a bit confused. Yes.
Is there a right answer? Or do you accept different designs?
For the design, yeah, there were loads of different designs last year. So.
There is no right answer.
Yep. That's a good question. For part 2, there is no specific answer that I'm looking for. I'm looking for your ability to apply the things that we've been talking about in terms of REST and HTTP, and your understanding of those to make a sensible design to the system. And that might almost certainly come out differently for each person.
It's a new marketing effort.
Maybe. Right.
I'm going to have spirit now.
Right. No, I'm not then. We can't be right. You can only write down my devices. iPhone. If you've got a new iPhone, you might do. I changed my iPad out. Any last questions?
Why?
Any other questions? Okay, right, I'll see you tomorrow.